Ask Reddit, what's the most unsettling or unexplainable thing that's ever happened to you? Rented a basement with a constantly running, overfilling toilet just to find out the owner's mother had drowned her disabled baby in it 20 or so years prior. I bought my camper and moved out 2 days later. It's not unexplainable, but a little creepy and just happened a few weeks ago. I woke up in the middle of the night thinking of my old boss. I had worked for him for 21 years. Good guy, and I always had a lot of respect for him. I started thinking about him, wondering how he and his family were. We would run into each other from time to time, but I hadn't seen him in a while. His home phone number even popped into my mind, having called him there numerous times. That day at work, I get a forwarded email from my current employer because she knew I worked for him. He had passed away on Saturday. Very eerie. One of my old teachers fell off the ladder and got pretty screwed up. Me and a friend were unlucky enough to be the ones who found him. He wasn't dead and we called 911. Later that night, I had a dream that he had died about 20 minutes after he actually died. My friend had almost the same dream at almost the same time. Weird how we sometimes know someone is going to die. In high school, I was asleep in a second period class. It was early and the teacher didn't care. The bell went off and I immediately got out of the room on my way to meet my girlfriend at the time. Saw her, said hello, the usual, then hurried to my third period before the bell rang again. Got to the classroom and it wasn't my class. Teacher said I was early. Looked at the clock and sure enough it was the start of second period. Hurried back, went back to sleep. Didn't hit me until later just how strange it was. The second is a bit more bizarre. Right around the same time as the first story, I had a dream that I got hit by a commuter train on some tracks right in the middle of my town. As I was laying there injured and apparently dying, my girlfriend, same one as above, was holding me and the song "Where Oh Where Can My Baby Be" was playing in the background. I eventually woke up to a call from her asking if I wanted to go with her and her sister to a food festival that happened annually in town, which was coincidental because that's right where I was dying in my dream. I agreed to go and quickly told her about my dream and how intense it was. We had a laugh and I got ready. After they picked me up, we made our way into town and parked. As we were walking, I started to hear it. A band that was playing in one of the music tents was playing that song. The very same song from my dream. I remember grabbing my girlfriend's arm and being like, whoa. Just kind of thinking it was a crazy coincidence, she realized what I was on about and also chuckled at the randomness. Just then, as we were standing there just being a little weirded out, we heard the dinging of the railroad crossing. The fest was on either side of the tracks and the train ran practically right through it. The train went through the fest at the exact time the band was playing the song from my dream. The two of us would talk about that day for years to come, even after we stopped dating. It happened to me last night. Friend A was sloppy drunk and had just broken up with his girlfriend. Friend B steps outside for a smoke and we follow. Friend A, with no warning, proceeds to his mom's car, grabs a pistol, and shoots himself in the head right in front of us. Smelling the smoke from the gun, watching him do it, and hearing his mom's screams when she saw are the most unsettling thing I've ever seen to date. Sorry if it's not unexplainable. I made friends with a German international student in my math class last year named Emil. About 2 weeks later, she just disappears. I asked my classmates and teacher where she was and nobody else remembered her, and the teacher said that there was nobody on the class list named Emil. I was crossing the road after I had a detention after school, so I was on my own. Just as I started to cross, it felt like something pulled the handle of my backpack and pulled me down. I turned around really pissed off. I thought I was about to get mugged or something, and a Subaru Impreza drove past at about 80 mph. I'm not religious and into the supernatural whatsoever, but that's the one thing that plays off my mind when things like this get mentioned because I can't explain it at all. No two ways about it, I would have died. I moved a year ago, and whenever I stayed up past 12 at my new house, I'd hear some low, droning hum every night. I lived out in the middle of nowhere, so it couldn't be a car engine, and when I'd go out and look into the sky, there were no airplanes, just that hum. Only me and my father could hear it. I moved away a few weeks ago for college, and since then, the hum has stopped. Something unexplainable takes control of me to save my life, throughout my life. Doing 110 mph in a dual carriageway around a long left-hand turn. I just passed, so I was obviously the best driver in the world, right? And without my brain making me do it, I moved into the outside lane. As I thought, what? How? Why? I noticed a broken down van in the inside lane. Obviously, I'd have swerved to avoid it and crashed hard. But luckily, there was something that steered me outside well before the van was even in eyeshot. Running down the country roads, and I kid you not, something full-blown pushed me or drop-kicked me off of the road and onto a grass verge just before I reached a cross junction off the main road I was running on. Car flies over the crossroads right in front of me, thinking it was his right of way and would have wiped me out had I not stopped running. Yesterday, mountain biking with my army mates, cruising down a flat, smooth road between trails, and my bike was laid down from underneath me, as if something just slowly pushed it over. We all stopped because I'd stacked it, but no one laughed because no one understood how it had happened. It was impossible. Right as a bus took a very wide berth around the corner we were going down. Whoever you are, Ghost to Ghost, nice one, bro. Keep up the good work. I had a colleague who I was close friends with. She'd come over for dinner. We'd taken trips together, ate lunch every day. One day, she called in sick. I stopped by after work to check on her. She was pale and her eyes were sunken in. She didn't even open the door all the way. I asked if she was okay, but she screamed at me to get out, hurled a dish at my head, and just kept shouting unintelligibly until I'd driven off. That night, she went missing and nobody heard from her again, not even her husband. She just disappeared. Police searched for her and everything. By far one of the weirder things to ever happen to me, and the start of me locking my doors and windows every night. My mother and I went to see a psychic when I was 19. I was pretty skeptical, but she didn't want to go alone, and said she'd pay for a reading if I came along. My father had just died, and I knew my mother was pretty vulnerable to have come up with an idea like this, so I did. My mom went first, and I sat in the waiting area for over an hour, super bored. This time was pre-smartphones. I was really impatient and annoyed by the time my turn finally came around. I already thought the psychic was a fraud, and I laughed outright when I entered her dim, candlelit, smoky, incense-filled little psychic cove. Jesus and the Virgin Mary were everywhere. The psychic proceeds to ask me what type of reading I want, and I pick a tarot one because it's the cheapest and I feel bad that my mother is wasting money on this type of crap. I make sure to keep my body language really neutral and respond to questions with the minimal amount of information possible, age, date of birth, etc. I shuffle the cards, the psychic casts the reading and starts telling me stuff. Says she sees a move, a new relationship, blah blah blah. Things that you could reasonably predict for any 19-year-old girl. She then gets to a specific card and gets all dramatic. She gets very still and looks at me with a super serious and intense expression. Goody. I'm getting my mother's money's worth. She asks me if I'm pregnant or had a miscarriage recently. I kind of roll my eyes and say no. Still really intense, she tells me that the cards indicate that something terrible will happen to me. That this card indicates death looming over my shoulder and that it involves my womb. She warns me to be careful, that she sees blood and lots of it. She finishes up the rest of the reading and I ask her when all of this is supposed to happen. She says the reading was cast for about a year. I thank her. My mother and I leave. Fast forward 6 months, I've moved and gotten in my first really serious relationship. I go to the ER with terrible abdominal pain. I'm treated badly, sent home and advised to take some Motrin. I black out, split my head open, come back to the ER. Turns out I've lost half my body's volume of blood from a ruptured ovarian cyst that didn't stop bleeding. I get stitched up, have emergency laparoscopic surgery, and a blood transfusion. If I hadn't split my head open in the fall and come back to the ER, I would have been dead within an hour or two. I still don't know what to think. It could be a wild coincidence, but I really wish I could remember the rest of the stuff the psychic told me. I was driving home on a well-lit, very popular road at about 11:30 at night. My neighborhood has an unlit straight road that you have to travel down to get to. This straight road branches off the main road. I glanced in my rear view mirror and saw the silhouette of what looked like some guy chasing after my car. The street lights from the main road lit the background up enough to see him. I only say him because of the height and build of the silhouette. It was too dark to actually see the gender. This man or woman appeared to be hauling completely. I'm talking dead on Usain Bolt sprint. I turned my car left into my neighborhood from the straight road and waited for a few seconds. Nothing. No one came around the corner. I backed up and turned right back onto the straight road to take a look. The straight road was empty. There are some woods on one side of the road, so I opened my window to see if I couldn't hear movement in the trees or anything like that, but I heard nothing. There's a good amount of homeless people here, so I figure it was just some crazy homeless guy, but who knows? Years ago, I moved into a relatively new apartment complex way on the edge of a gigantic city. On two sides of the property, it was still woods. Weird stuff happened while I lived there, so mostly I heard weird sounds and stuff inside, but I figured that was normal for apartments. The laundry room door wouldn't stay closed, would pop open randomly. There was no way to pull it open once closed without turning the knob, but the door would open on its own. Also would wake up at night and find all the lights in the common areas on, all but in the 2 bedrooms. Anyway, one day I came home and, as a girl who grew up in gigantic city is apt to do, I habitually bolted the door behind me as usual. Husband was at work and had just dropped kids at a friend's house, so I was alone. As I crossed the living room to my bedroom, I saw in the reflection of some wall pictures a man walk behind me, kind of perpendicular to my path. Tall, cowboy hat, white guy. I spun around, no one there. Yikes. Told my friend about it. She said I should talk to her mom. Talked to her mom, who said her friend was a victim of a serial killer, and when caught, the killer reported burying 10 bodies in a particular bit of woods on the edge of gigantic city, but only 7 bodies were ever recovered. She had obsessively followed the case in the papers because of her friend. That woods, right where our apartment complex had been built, part of the woods freshly cleared for that purpose 3 years earlier. I once had a balloon. After several weeks, it had deflated enough to just sit in the middle of the room at about handheld height. At this point, we started telling my little sister it was being held by Johanna the ghost. A bit of backstory about Johanna. When I was stripping the wallpaper from my bedroom a couple of months before this incident, we found a lot of blood on the walls, leading from the window and weirdly to the attic. This was never explained. A well-timed Sweeney Todd song on my iPod led to the resulting ghost being named Johanna. Then, the balloon began to move. It would track round the room, following the path from the window to the attic, to the door continuously. It did this for days and was put down to convection currents, a very reasonable explanation. Convection currents was also the excuse we used when Mom found the balloon under her desk. We put it back into the room and then watched as it traced its way, beautifully at the right height to be held by a small child, out the bedroom, across the landing, down the stairs, through the hall, through the lounge, to the far end where it tucked itself under the desk, watched by my entire family. Mom just popped the balloon and told us off for a trick she or we didn't understand how we could do. My 8-year-old sister couldn't sleep for days as now we didn't know where Johanna was. We have never been allowed a helium balloon since. Another fun fact, before she even started floating around the room, my dog came into my bedroom one day and refused to enter, growling at the balloon. This was probably a natural dog reaction to an unexplained magical floating ball. Also, none of us believed, or still quite believe, in ghosts. But I have never found another excuse for this bizarre behavior other than some very precise convection currents and the balloon being just at the optimum density to float at the Goldilocks zone.